Good morning, brothers and sisters. This is Sunday sermon on August 27 from Genesis 16, verse 1 to 13. The title of today's sermon is Who is a Man of Faith? What is life? Life is like you cannot go everywhere you want to go. You cannot do everything you want to do. You don't get everything you want. You can't fulfill everything you desire. It is a life that doesn't make it easy to get out of the daily routine. Life is always full of regret and remorse. What do you really need? What can we do? Smiling at the growing feet of a newborn baby, or going for a walk with your elderly parents, or turning off your cell phone at least once a day and meditating on God's grace for a while, and not missing out on small gratitude or thankfulness in your life. Isn't that happiness? May this short time of worshiping God to be a time to let go of the busy strings of thoughts that the world is pulling at, and focus on God, meditating on His heart and His will, and receiving the comfort and grace and peace of heaven. Verse 1 of today's text expresses a woman's infertility in a very simple way. Sarai, the wife of Abraham, did not give birth. This one verse alone doesn't seem like a big deal, because there are so many infertile women in the world. However, if we take a closer look at the realities of life contained in this one short passage, it is no small feat. Who is Sarai? She was the hostess of the richest house in the area at the time. She is a beautiful woman who makes many men thrill when they see her face just once. She is a woman whose husband is Abraham, who is respected by the people of the world at the time. What is lacking in such a woman? You don't know much about life from the outside. God does not give everything to one person. There was also a great sorrow for the woman who seemed to have everything. It was infertility. We don't know exactly how many years Abraham and Sarah got married. However, since Abraham was 85 and Sarah was 75 at the time, it can be assumed that they had been married for about 30 or 40 years. This big rich man's lineage was about to be cut off because of her infertility. In such a situation, desperate situation, what do you do? Even when you have a lot of money, even when you a beautiful face, even when you have a lot of slaves in your household, what do you do? Even when you dress up your body in a gold and silver jewelry and wrap it around in luxury things. None of that makes Sarai happy because of her infertility. If you compare what others have with what you don't have, even a noble lady like Sarai is bound to be unhappy. Sarai is already 75 years old. Biological conditions make it virtually impossible to produce children naturally. Of course, God promised earlier, through this old couple, God will give them as many descendants as the stars in the sky and as the sand in the sea. So the couple believed in God's promise, and they waited for them. But it's been a decade already passed. Even though she was shrinking into a body of grandmother, God had no message to them. That's why Sarai could not take it any longer. So she decided to take it upon herself to do it. This is verse 2 of the text. She decided to choose one of her servant girls and give it to her husband as a concubine. She would not have chosen any of those many slave girls plainly. She would have carefully handpicked health, physical fitness, integrity, toughness, and faith would have been taken into consideration. And then Sarai chose Hagar. Since God did not seem to move at all for them, Sarah uses human's means and human's method according to the ancient social customs of the time. This is not at all illegal, unusual, or socially reprehensible. From the point of view of human custom at the time, this was very responsible thing to do as an infertile wife. But God's perspective is different. From God's point of view, this is not the path God has offered to them. It is not God's will. So Abraham and Sarah were ahead of God's will. The path of faith is to follow God's leading, not get ahead of God. The Abraham and Sarah's action was disobedience to God's will. It was unbelief. However, this is not God's way, but her husband Abraham listened to his wife without any complaining. Verse 2 said, and Abraham heard Sarai. Abraham saying, okay, honey, I will do as you say. Obedience to God is not an easy thing for a married couple to do. Quarreled with one another. Honey, can we afford to obey God now in our home situation? No, honey, you have to obey God now. No, honey, it is not time yet to obey God. Why there are quarrels between the spouses? Because couples have a difference in their level of faith or maturity of faith. However, on the other hand, disobeying God, couples usually are very harmonious. Yes, honey, God understands our situation, so this time we don't obey God now, okay? So what happened next? This is verse 3 of the text. As soon as Abraham slept with her servant Hagar, she became pregnant. So they didn't have to wait 10 years like God's promise. It is not a year, not even a month. It was just a matter of days. That's why it is so difficult of living a life of faith in God. So obedience and following God's way is a life of faith. So we have to wait obediently and patiently. But in this busy world, it feels so slow. So delivery is too slow. If delivery is slow, then it won't be a successful business. So Sarai and Abraham used human method, human means in this matter. But this is fast delivery. It's a totally quick service. Like yesterday, I clicked on the order button on the internet website, and this afternoon I received a package at the front door. It is so cool, so quick. If there was such a quick way, why couldn't we do it earlier? So is the problem in Abraham's house solved now by such a human method? So have Sarah and Abraham finally solved the family's year-long homework? Let us go to the second half of the verse 3 of the text. When Hagar discovers that she is pregnant, her attitude suddenly changes. She was chosen by Sarai to be good, to be sincere, and to be obedient. But this slave girl begins to despise or contempt her mistress, Sarai. The word contempt here means cheeky. It means the politeness disappears. It means crossing the line of her duty. The better a person is, the more humble he should be. The Bible wants us not to forget where we come from. We must remember that we were all dust and dirt, and we should be humble. We must not forget our original duty. As the rice ripens, it bows its head. When you see someone with a steep head, you don't have to wonder why they do that. This is because they are still unripe. Sarah tried to solve the problem in a human way, human method that she employed. And when she thought there was only cool things from eating, from human method, but she encounters even more pain and hurt from human method. This is why man's way is different from God's way. Sarah stamped her own feet by her human method. As anyone says, did I start this job to do this? It is the bitter fruit that is tasted at the end of the path that is not God's way, but man's way or man's method. Its fruit is the betrayal and disappointment caused by man. But following God's path, even though it seems slow and lagging behind the world's speed, but it will be the fruit of glory, reward, and comfort that cannot be compared with anything else in this world. Sarai followed the path of human method, and she began to taste the bitter fruit on the path of the human method. When Sarai is despised by her servant girl Hagar, she began to attack her husband Abraham. Why should I be treated like this by such a lowly slave girl? You deserve this kind of contempt, not me. So Sarai pushed her husband to the corner. But Abraham was a gentleman. At such a time, if the husband confronts the wife, there will be a big fight in the house, right? So Abraham has nothing to say, and he kept silent before Sarai in such a situation. Someone asked an 85-year-old man who celebrated his 55th wedding anniversary in a good health, "Sir, how can you keep healthy and strong after such a long marriage? What is your secret?" Then the old man said, "My wife and I agreed something before we got married." "What agreement did you make?" Then the old man replied, "If the argument between me and my wife was going to be protracted and it was going to be a big fight, then I decided to get out of the house and walk around the neighborhood 3 laps. What does that have to do with your health? Oh man, think about it. How can you not be healthy when you go out every day for 55 years and walk around the neighborhood 3 laps a day? Even some days I went out 3 times a day and did as many as 9 laps. The secret to good health is to stay away from anger." Abraham must have known this principle. If even Abraham pressed Sarai so hard, then Sarai would probably go crazy. Abraham calmed down Sarai. Abraham said to Sarai, "You are the hostess of this house, and you do as you please." Abraham says, the epitome of a timid husband. He leaves all the complicated and difficult things to his wife. Sarai then abused Hagar. who is pregnant. Then abused Hagar cannot stand it and runs out of the house. Increasingly, the shape of the house of Abraham becomes more and more unreasonable, uncomfortable. The female servant who carried her husband's child had a quarrel with her mistress and ran away from home. Will Abraham and Sarah feel comfortable now that the ugly hair has fallen out? Is it cool now? No, not at all. The heart is heavier and more painful in this home of Abraham. Peace in the home was shattered when God's people abandoned God's ways and God's path and follow man's means and man's method. They eventually reap this bitter fruit from such choice. In those days in the Middle East, as soon as you step out of your home or your tent, you immediately encounter the wilderness. It is an uninhabitable wasteland. Finally, God intervenes. God sends an angel to call Hagar. Hagar, the handmaid of Sarai. Where did you come from and where are you going? Where did you come from and where are you going? This is a question that asks the essence of our lives. Just as God asked Hagar a question as she wanders aimlessly through the wilderness, God is asking the same question to us who lives in this wilderness world. This question asks where we stand in life. The Lord Jehovah's messenger said, Hagar, the handmaid of Sarai. He is calling Hagar. In other words, it reaffirms Hagar's identity. Hagar, no matter how hard you struggle, you are Sarai's handmaid, and you belong to Abraham's household, whom I have chosen. The place where you should be is not in this wilderness where you build your pride, but in the house of Abraham, in the bosom of Abraham. And the Lord's messenger exhort Hagar. He said, return to your mistress and submit to her. Put aside your pride and break your stubbornness and go back to your duty. The Hebrew word for submission used in the phrase submit to Hagar, submit to the Sarai, is the same word as the word the abuse used in the phrase Sarai abused Hagar. It literally means go back to your mistress and receive her abuse. On the surface, this sounds very sobering, but this exhortation is God's consideration for Hagar to have mercy on her and to save her. God showed Hagar the way to live. That is God's way for Hagar. Even if you are abused again, the place where you should be is the house of faith, the house of promise, the house of Abraham, where Abraham's protection and scrutiny are located. No matter how hard it is for you, our place for us, our place is where God's promises are, a community of faith. Even if we are sustained or roasted in it, we must be in the bosom of the faith in God. That's where we supposed to be. Hagar finally obeyed God's counsel and God's path and returned to Abraham's house. At this time, the Lord Jehovah, his messenger, gives Hagar a wonderful covenant. In other words, God promised the blessing of multiplying the offspring of Hagar's body. He said in verse 11, name your son Ishmael, meaning that God heard the voice of your pain. The name Ishmael is a very religious name. It means that God heard the voice of my pain. Dear friends, for those of us who live in this world, which is like a sea of suffering, God is the one. God is God of Ishmael. It is God who hears the voice of our pain. Then in this passage, we witness an unexpected and surprising sight. It is an amazing confession of faith that came out of Hagar's mouth, which seems unlikely at all. In other words, how could someone as humble as me see God watching over me in this land of endless despair? Dear friends, that is our God. In a situation where there is no one to help us, where there is nowhere to put our bodies, no matter how much we look around, God is the one who watches over us. God is the one who sees us. God is the one who lifts us up from the land of despair. And He shows us the way to go. He shows us where we stand. From the beginning to end, this Genesis chapter 16 of today's text reveals the problems of human limitation, human suffering, human foolish choices, and human despair. It shows a weak human being who abandoned the path promised by God in the face of the immediate problem of suffering in life, and chose the means and method of human to go deeper into despair and problem. It is none other than the family of Abraham and Sarah's story, who seems to be walking the path of faith in God. But in chapter 16, there is not a single word of confession of faith in God from the mouth of Abraham and Sarai, who should be the most exemplary faith. Surprisingly, however, in the final scene of the text of the chapter 16, we hear a surprising confession of faith from Hagar's mouth, which is the most unexpected. Life is a drama of twists. This is especially true of the life of faith. Going to church for a long time doesn't automatically make you a person of faith. Nothing in this world is taken for granted. Who is the person of faith that Genesis chapter 16 teaches us? A person of faith is one who follows the path that God leads, no matter how slow it may seem. The person of faith is not the one who is ahead of God's will. A person of faith is not a person who chooses the means and method of human in the face of life's problems and challenges, and follows the path that the world suggests. A person of faith is the one who does not blame people or circumstances in the face of life's problems, but instead seeks God's will and follows the path of obedience to God's will. A person of faith is the one who confesses God as Ishmael, God of Ishmael, who hears the voice of our pain and who watches over us even in the midst of our suffering of life. May all of us who are walking the arduous path of life like a wilderness experience God listening to our groans of pain and watching over us this week, and become people of faith, the person of faith who walks the path that God leads. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for showing us the way we should go, whether our lives are easy or adversity. Lord, help us to learn from what happens in Abraham's family in today's text. Help us to learn who is a true man of faith in any given environment in our life. May we be on the path of true life, not the possible, easy, convenient path that the world offers, but the path of true life that God leads. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.